Welcome, everyone. My name is Henrik Nordahl. I'm with the Independent Evaluation Department of Norway's Development Cooperation. It is us who has the national responsibility for evaluation in this sector, and I would just very much would like to welcome you here for this conversation as such. And I think we are in for a very interesting debate, and our mandate as evaluation unit, fostering learning and holding the actors responsible, yes, but also to contribute to a knowledge-based development cooperation. Today, I hope we get a very open and free debate as well that will bring us maybe some new insights, not just for the audience, but also for the participants. And to lead this and be moderator for this event, I have my colleague here, Brand-Jacobsen, who has over 20 years of experience in evaluation, conflict management, peace building, etc. So I think he's very well placed to keep this conversation right on the edge where we want it. So please, without further ado, the word is yours, Kai.
Tusen tack, Henrik. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our session, Crisis and Cooperation, Building Smarter Aid Through Evaluation and Innovation. My name, as Henrik has said, is Brand-Jacobsen, and I'm a senior evaluator with the senior evaluation advisor with the Independent Evaluation Department of Norwegian Development Cooperation. We are living in a dramatic and often overwhelming and even confusing moment. When thinking about our session today, we had in mind two contexts of crisis that are at the heart of what we are facing in development cooperation today. First, the global crisis, the climate emergency and environmental destruction, a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale. Last year, nearly 300 million people, 1 in every 27 on the planet, was in need of humanitarian aid. In 2024, the number of active armed conflicts rose to 61, the highest since 1946. 11 of them full-scale wars. Since 2010, state-involved conflicts have nearly doubled, battle deaths have quintupled, and most victims are civilians. There were approximately 123.2 million people globally displaced by persecution, conflict, violence, or other crises at the end of 2024. That was up from 43 million in 2010. As of 2024, 692 million people are registered as living in extreme poverty. Second, there is a crisis in aid and development cooperation. Yes, as we've heard in many sessions throughout Arendalsuka, aid works, but much doesn't. What is dramatic at the moment in scale and impact are the massive cuts that the sector is facing. The United States government has slashed its aid, but it's not alone. Germany, the UK, and others have done so as well. And the cuts also come with growing attacks on the United Nations, climate action, and multilateralism itself. Those in the least developed countries and most in need are affected the worst. We're also seeing an ever-growing part of our aid budget spent to address humanitarian crisis and response, instead of addressing root causes and drivers of poverty and conflict. This is the dual challenge: worsening global crisis and development cooperation in a significant challenge where choices will have to be made. Choices which can have a significant impact on people's lives and on how we meet the challenges we face today. The question is, what is the future of Norwegian development cooperation in this context? What are the choices we have to make, and how will we make them? Smart aid includes knowing better and spending better, grounding decisions in evidence and rigorous evaluation, embracing innovation, finding better ways to achieve results, even in the toughest conditions, and doing development cooperation in ways that are fundamentally based upon respect, partnership, and achieving real necessary impact. Today, our goal is going to be to discuss how evaluation and innovation can strengthen Norwegian development cooperation in this challenging moment, how they can help so that decisions that need to be taken can be informed by actual evidence, knowledge, and how, even in a time of crisis, evaluation and innovation can help us achieve greater impact where it is needed most. In this context, I'm very glad to welcome our 4 contributors to today's discussion. Cedric de Koning, Research Professor at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, NUPI, and Senior Advisor for Accord. Cedric is a leading expert on peace building, resilience, and the climate peace nexus, with decades of experience as a diplomat in UN peacekeeping and advisor to the UN and African Union. Zenda Ofir, an international evaluation specialist with over 25 years experience working across the Global South. Zenda is known for her work on foresight, evidence-based policy, transformation, and decolonizing evaluation, advising organizations from the United Nations to leading foundations across the world. Eirik Mufos. Eirik is Managing Director of Langsikt, the Center for Long-Term Policy. Eirik is a leading voice for aid reform and long-term evidence-based policy, with a background as a senior official at NORAD and a track record in both government and civic initiatives. And Claudio Alberti, Policy Analyst at the OECD Development Cooperation Directorate, managing the OECD DAC Network on Development Evaluation. Claudio has extensive humanitarian and development experience with the United Nations and international think tanks. Now, Claudio, Eirik, Zenda, Cedric, I'm going to invite us to have a real discussion. So please, as we discussed, whenever someone wishes to contribute and speak, please do so. If someone has something to say or wants to follow on from someone else, please do so. I will only step in if helpful. I should also warn you that in a few moments after some comments, I'm going to invite a question from the audience. So please think of what you would like to ask. And we hope to also come back at the end to have opportunity for real discussion and engagement together. Perhaps we can have the first part of our discussion inviting your insights on this current moment, the crisis and challenges and opportunities we're facing, before we spend the majority of our time really diving into how evaluation can help us address it. I also want to invite us to draw inspiration from the field of medicine. In medicine, it's not enough to do diagnosis, to say what's wrong and describe the problem. We expect it as a field to look for solutions. And that's where we want to come to today, to understand the challenges that face us, but to orient ourselves especially to what can be done and how evaluation can help us do it. And with that, I hand it over to you.
Well, maybe I can kick us off. I mean, the situation you described is dire. We're all living through the uncertainty of the moment we're in. So I think this conversation about knowledge and innovation is very relevant, because for me, it's really about how do we navigate the uncertainty? How do you navigate the uncertainty of introducing new policies in this space, and then managing them in terms of learning from how they are being implemented and using that to inform adaptation over time. So understanding the processes we're engaged in terms of engaging with the world as policymakers, as peace building and development practitioners, as something that is a continuous process of engagement, probing, learning, adapting, trying again. For me, this is how I think the essential link between evaluation, knowledge, and the moment we're in terms of managing and navigating uncertainty.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that. There's a beautiful word in English, which is liminal. So we're in a liminal space. What it means is we're between two worlds, the world of what has been and the world of not yet. We don't know what it's going to look like. So this is a time of great uncertainty and discomfort, right? Because we know new things are emerging, systems are unstable, what we know has been in place are changing, but that's the best time to make change. It really is the best time when things are shaking. So it's a wonderful time to come together around this context. It's not always comfortable because, some of the things we experience are, for example, shift of power to the east and to the global south. This is not comfortable. But it is a time in which the world needs to come together to solve global problems. And we cannot afford to be divided by sometimes imaginary enemies. We really need to work together, to be together, to solve things together. And we believe there's a great sense of urgency to this. And I'm passionate about the role that evaluation can play to help us plan, as you said, to take decisions, to prioritize, to improve based on evidence, which makes it much more solid when we do this. However, things will have to be done differently to what it's been done before. So that's our challenge, which we'll discuss today.
Yeah, and just coming after what was said and echoing all of it, I think there are things we don't know, but there are also things that we know. One thing that we know, Kai mentioned it at the beginning, when we look at the decreasing of funding to development cooperation, the OECD released in June a foresight study where there is a forecast of decrease of about 9 to 17% in the coming year. And this comes on top of a 9% cut that we have already seen in 2024. So we are expecting pressure to deliver more with less. And the conversation about how evaluation and what we know feeds into what we are going to do and how we really leverage what we know works and bring it at scale in an efficient way is key. And so I really look forward to the conversation of how we bring innovation and how we better link the finding of evaluation to policy and programming on the ground.
So we're discussing how to generate knowledge through evaluations. I think maybe my perspective into this debate as not an expert in evaluations itself, though I've been organizing RCT design incubators in NORAD when I used to work there, and I'm a big fan of investing more in generating knowledge. I think maybe the biggest bottleneck right now is in using knowledge. So there's no point in investing in knowledge and learning if there's nobody using whatever we learn, right? And some people will say it's a waste to spend $1 million on an impact evaluation if that takes $1 million away from an important program. Well, if the program is 100 million and you can increase the effectiveness by 5%, that's a really good investment. However, if there's nobody listening or actually making use of the knowledge generated, it is truly a waste of money. And I think this is and should really be a motivation killer for people in the evaluation field. Despite the fact that I think too much of current development aid is not evidence-based, we've seen a big increase in knowledge in this space. I mean, if you just look at impact evaluations as a part of it, it's been a significant increase since the early 2000s till today. You can look up, 3IE has this graph of impact evaluations in the world from a few hundred to now 13,000 or something. So I think if we want to invest more in generating knowledge, which my fellow panelists here know a lot about, we also need to make sure that NORAD, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Prime Minister's office, and other government and donors also make use of it. So as NORAD would say, or the former Director General, la facta ha macta, or letting facts or evidence inform policy, I think that's truly important as well.
So I should make an admission here, perhaps, which is a bit unusual considering that my role now is working with the Independent Evaluation Department of Norwegian Development Cooperation. But I was working in the field in peace building, on the ground in conflict-affected contexts for nearly 30 years. And for the first 10 years, I completely rejected evaluation. It was something that whenever I heard people talk about evaluation, to me, it was something that was being imposed by donors. And exactly as was said, instead we needed to spend our time doing the work, engaging in it. That changed. And at one point, I came to the point of view of, if we're serious about what we're doing, if we really want to engage and to make an impact, then evaluation is fundamental. Because evaluation is about critically reflecting, assessing, challenging, and really engaging to understand what is working, what isn't working, and how. But still today, as you said, we've come a long way. About 20 years ago, a director of the evaluation department at NORAD asked, do we have evidence that Norwegian aid works? And the answer was no. But in the last 20 years, a lot of evidence has been gathered. So we're in this moment where the world, including Norway, is having to make critical challenges. We're facing these cuts. What can be done so that we do bring that evidence to the decision-making process? What do we need to do within our field to make sure that as we're taking these decisions and working to address these challenges, how can we engage with evaluation? How can we engage with innovation to help to inform that process?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we can do that, we must just understand what evaluation is and what it is not. And I just want to make the point that the ability to think and work evaluatively has been with us for millennia. The first recorded experience of evaluation as a systematic practice is about 6,000 years ago. It's deeply embedded in all of us. How to assess whether something is good, whether it's not, whether it's appropriate or not, whether it's useful or not, right? All that's happened in the last 70 years, we've got better at being systematic and applying it in spaces that work. What has been happening now and why we're at a pivotal moment also for evaluation practice is evaluation has been seen in the past more for accountability, as we said, and less for really truly informing decisions. And there are many reasons for it which we can discuss. But what evaluation has to be in a world of uncertainty, where we don't know what the world will look like in 5 years, is it needs to become more of a navigation instrument. So it's important to use it right from the start. And while one works through things, policies, implementation, and their design, to use evaluative thinking right from that moment. And evaluative thinking helps you to answer things about not only what difference did we make, but how, why, for whom, under what conditions, when is it best to do this? It's an incredibly powerful tool if it's done right, to help us improve our policies, our decisions, for the benefit of whoever has to be served through it.
Yes, and I think the key is really, like, when we think of innovation, I think of innovation in two ways. There is a part of innovation that is about social behavior. It is the behavioral change that we need in the evaluation space, about really moving from the compliance approach to evaluation to the learning, and really embedding the evaluation from the planning through the implementation, and having clear path to communicate to those who are making decisions to inform programming and policy so that evidence are taken into account. We have plenty of experience. I have a past life in the humanitarian field. Lately I was working on Ukraine. We did large work on at the border crossing point. We had similar crises in other areas. None of the evidence that were produced in that crisis were used right off the bat. It's only after that people, when they were struggling, they reach out and they say, how did you do it? So how do we make sure that people who need the information have it when they are needed? And then we have a second type of innovation that is the technology innovation. I've seen there is a lot on AI. How can we leverage AI? How can we leverage the technology? And it goes back to the point on utilization. There is tons of reports that no one reads. Some of them are good, some of them maybe are not. But the point is, the evidence is there, and those tools can help us to make it more digestible and extrapolating the information for the decision maker. Because sometimes what happens as well within the evaluation community is we preach to the choir. We talk to other evaluators, we tell each other how much we love each other evaluation, but then we do not present it in a way that is digestible for someone who has 5 minutes and has to take a decision. So I really encourage people to think of innovation on both sides. One is really about the behavior. How do we change the behavior? How do we change the culture of evaluation? And the second one is about how do we leverage the technologies.
I think for me a best practice is, in addition to commissioning evaluation from experts from time to time, to really develop a developmental learning process where you are evaluating every day or very regularly by the people who are actually doing the implementation. For instance, we have developed a performance assessment system for United Nations peacekeeping operations. And there the peacekeepers who are actually implementing the projects come together every 3-4 months and go through a process where they have to assess themselves the degree to which they think their projects are actually, and their actions are actually contributing to the outcomes that they would like to see. And then from there, that develops into a process that eventually goes to decision makers. But even at their level, whenever they come together, that engagement results in a lot of change in their everyday behavior, because they don't need to, everything doesn't need to go to the top for decision making, right? There's a lot of things in your day-to-day management at different levels that you can do differently. Once you are invited into a conversation where you can think for yourself, actually maybe we assumed this would have that effect, but now that I'm doing it, I realize maybe we can do it differently. So that lived process of continuous learning, I think, is another way of thinking of evaluation that is critically important.
So, 3 thoughts came up in ours. Zenda mentioned we should stop considering evaluation as compliance or for reporting, right?
Yeah.
And do it more as investing in new knowledge. That also means we shouldn't be saying, like, if you do a development program, you can spend 2% or 5% or whatever on evaluation, because we don't always need to do it. Maybe it's been evaluated 1,000 times already. Let's not waste more money on it. But strategically investing in knowledge where it's needed. But how do we make sure we only invest when it's needed? Well, we need to change from supply of evaluation to demand. So actually saying that funders need to require evidence for anything they want to fund, because that makes NGOs go on demand side. They will say, we actually need you to look into this cash transfer program. Does it work for our objective in this program? And they will actually require and also want to invest in knowledge. Third idea is maybe we just need to be a lot more strict. So when Claudio said, sometimes you're just discussing evaluations with each other. What if we had some like nøkkelhull, svanemerke, miljøfyrtårn, some stamp of approval? We could say the independent evaluation department, unless they've stamped approved on some program, NORAD couldn't fund it. I think that would be great. Let's stop saying that we know this works, we know this doesn't work, and decision makers are not listening anyway. They will always say, it works, it's fine, we know it works. They'll be sitting up here as me now, just making claims, coming up with proposals. I think we need to shift the power a bit. So politicians will criticize ideas such as this as being technocratic. Yes, indeed they are. But I think you would never be allowed to sell food unless the FDA has approved it. You wouldn't be allowed to sell medicines unless you've gone through rigorous testing. So why should we be allowed to give food, medicines, books, education, other programming to poor people or people in humanitarian need without any approval? I think this doesn't make sense for me at all.
I had mentioned that after a few moments I was going to open it up in case there was a question from anyone to the panelists, and I would like to do that now. Does anyone have a question that you would like to ask around this field of crisis and cooperation, this moment we're in, and recognizing that when we have had massive cuts to aid and humanitarian budgets and to development budgets, but the need itself is growing, there are going to be challenging decisions that we have to make. Any questions that anyone would like to ask from the audience?
Hi. Oh, goodness me, sorry. I think my question is, with these processes, they take a very, very long time when you're talking about evaluating anything, right? And if you're going to deep dive, there's a lot of research, and lots of different parties coming together. And my question is, in the kind of ever-changing global climate with everything that's happening, by the time you get to that evaluation and those facts that are coming out, are they relevant anymore? And how do you kind of balance that?
Okay, so let's take that as the first question. And I saw there was another hand that was up as well, please.
Two questions. One, I got you in your introduction, you mentioned about the importance of partnership into evaluation. What is partnership? How do you really forge partnership in a global context that is so divided, grossly desperate? Yeah, that's number one. And in particular, to ensure that you really have an evaluation that really creates results. Let me save my question number two. Because my question number two was really, I guess what we are talking here, we are talking of development cooperation, which necessarily means we are talking about development. What is development? Have we really defined it? Yeah. I have a couple of questions, but...
Thank you so much. And I know I said one question, but there were three eager hands which went up.
Thank you. My question is just if you think different actors are evaluated or understood or needed or seen as they need to be evaluated differently. We know that development aid, for example, civil society actors has been highly criticized and evaluated. We have more demands on development aid funding going to private sector actors or investors. Norfund, Swedfund, I'm from Sweden. Is that, we talk about business and private sector, are they also evaluated or seen as important to evaluate, or are we giving them a leeway because it's not civil society? Because we're also seeing that, in Norway there's a lot of discussion, as in Sweden, that the general public might criticize aid because they don't know if aid is effective or not. At the same time, actors might say, well, business is more effective than aid to change, to solve the problem when it comes to poverty. But are they evaluated the same way and held to the same standard?
Thank you.
So much to say.
I can comment briefly on the first question. So it is really difficult. And let's say we have a new government in Norway in 2 months, or whatever government we have, and they announce they want to invest more in education in fragile settings for girls. And we decide, well, we don't have enough knowledge here. Should we invest in some evaluations to build knowledge? And then maybe they take some years, and then we have a new government and they invest in something else. So I think a lot of volatility makes it harder, but probably somewhere around the world there will be investments in this field. I think we need to consider knowledge as a global public good and make sure we don't stop investing if there's a case to be made for other donors looking into it. The other one is an argument for having separate funding scheme for evaluations, not as part of programming, is to be able to do more long-term and longer evaluations. So we typically, NORAD provides funding for 5 years for a program. But how about you want to know 10 years down the road how effective that education program is? That would be easier if we said we have longer funding for evaluations, or maybe if we had a funding scheme where you can apply to get top-up funding to do a new data collection 10 years later or something. But a few thoughts.
Yeah, can I just go in, because it builds on what you just said, and I think the other element to it is also, the evaluation process, we know it takes long. The evaluation comes at the end of a project or of a strategy. You have a few cases where you have real-time evaluation that is picking up now. So there is the experience of real-time evaluation when you get real-time information about what works. And now, and also when it comes to evidence, you can also use rigorous monitoring of programs. Like in some cases that is enough. The other point is about the utilization of evidence synthesis. One thing we are seeing at global level when we look at evaluation as the funds are shrinking and we keep on advocating for generating new evidence, there is also a lot that is out there, has not been consolidated, and it has lesson learned that applies to Norway the same way it applies to the bilateral cooperation on Sweden. For instance, I think education in fragile setting If it works, it works if it's funded by NORAD, and it works if it's funded by another donors. And there are ongoing initiatives. There is a platform, a global platform that is putting together a tool to have live-in synthesis, evidence synthesis for all the SDGs that has been launched in June this year. So we hopefully will see the results in the next couple of years. That the investment is in setting up the infrastructure, but once it's up, that will provide living evidence. So there are those things that will ensure that even evaluation that might not have been conducted now will inform what is coming next.
Just for those who may not work in the field particularly as well, to say evidence synthesis is when we already have dozens, sometimes hundreds or even thousands of evaluations that have been carried out on a topic, and instead of doing a new evaluation to find out, we actually recognize there's a lot of knowledge and evidence that has been gathered. How can we do a synthesis of that and draw together the evidence from those to bring that to the decision makers or to the practitioners in the moment they need it?
I want to provoke a bit the audience and ourselves, because I would like to say that we have every possible methodology that's appropriate for the past and for the future. We have it in hand. Our problem is not technical. We have real-time evaluation, as you said. We have rapid evaluation to make things timely. We have evaluative diagnostic evaluation in the beginning, implementation. We have impact evaluation. The problem is not that. The problem is political. You want to tell your policymakers, your masters, that you made a certain impact. And this is important because it is taxpayer money. But for us in the Global South, what matters is, was this done in a way that really served us, if you really want to do good? Is the evaluation asking the right questions? Is it really bringing home what needs to be brought home to the funders? And that doesn't always connect. The second point I just quickly want to make is there is a real issue, therefore. We need a lot of humility at the moment, because we're also working with a paradigm shift. I don't like that word very much, but let's call it a drastic shift in the world. It's not just the poly-crisis that we all talk about. It's also the fact that for the last decade or two, there has been a much stronger understanding that the interconnectedness of everything in the world means that our project-based, short-term thinking in strategy design is really inappropriate. So not only in design, but in evaluation, we need to think very differently. What do we bring to methodology when we have interconnectedness where you need to change a system, not just a piece of the system? Because if you change that piece, it reverberates through the system in ways that are sometimes very negative. So we, who are the Global South, who are the objects of evaluation, often suffer from the negative consequences of very linear reductionist thinking about how the world works. So we have been moving evaluation, we have the methodologies, but to convince how to apply exactly, we need a lot of innovation in evaluation. We need a lot of innovation. And my question is, will Norway be brave enough, as you have been in the past? By the way, I respect Norway a huge amount. Will you be brave enough to experiment, to innovate, to support innovation? Because we know much more about what does not work than we know about what actually works in this new context.
Maybe I can just add to that and answer the question on partnerships as well.
Yes, I wanted to do
because I think one major difference between, for instance, a field like medicine and working with real people and societies is that it's not a chemical reaction that once you've designed Panado and it cures a headache in most people, you can use it again and again. But we can have had a successful project in a particular place in Kenya in 2024, and there's no guarantee that the same project will work in the same way in another place. And that is why we need to involve the people that are engaged in developing the knowledge, right? It's not knowledge that experts can somehow come up with and then we just roll with it. So every time we are engaged in social change, the people that are part of that process also need to be part of the evaluation and part of the learning. Because all of us have to learn as we go along, and we only learn from trying and thinking and getting reflection and then taking the next step as we go along. So for me, partnership and participatory processes is absolutely critical as part of evaluation.
So it's a very important point that generalizability is often challenging. So when the evaluation unit will get this stamp of approval, maybe it can't be approved because it won't be for every context, but at least for what doesn't work, they can get like not approved. Because usually that generalizes pretty well to other
What you can get approved is the process, right? Are you consulting the people involved?
Yeah.
Are you doing the right things? Then that's like the Rainbow Foundation or something, right? It's not the product, it's not the end result, because that will differ every time, but it's about how you go about it.
Yeah, and I think just removing programs that are evaluated and have bad results would be a good start. To the third question about what is the goal, I just very shortly, I think one big step is also just getting every applicant to really precisely define the objective of a program. Because, you know, better education for girls is not an objective you can evaluate easily. What is better education? I mean, you need to be more precise, and ideally also have a good theory of change or path to impact. How do you aim to get to this objective? Otherwise, it's really hard to evaluate. Fourth question on private sector. I think, sadly, they often get away with, instead of talking about outcome, they talk about, we mobilize this much capital.
Very sure.
And we mobilize 3 times more capital, as if input is equal to outcome. Like if you, I spent 10,000 kroner buying this T-shirt, doesn't mean it's quality, right? So I think we need to stop letting them come away with discussing input, even if they have 25x or whatever, and show us some evidence that they have good outcome or cost benefit as well, not only cost, low cost or high benefit.
Just very briefly, again to the gentleman at the back, how you define successful development depends on where you sit. And so we need to be far more thoughtful about what development actually means and what successful, effective development really means. Number one, an evaluation can help with that, but that means we need to reflect on different knowledge systems. Indigenous communities tell us that evidence generated without us is not valid, is not credible. RCTs will never work in that context, it will never be used. And so it's really important that we start respecting the different contexts, but also the different ways in which people look at things like what is effectiveness, what is success. It's not what people think in one particular country. It's very diverse around the world.
Yeah, and you covered part of what I wanted to say, and I think the definition of success is key. Because the moment we define this is what a successful program is, and this is what is the objective, we are applying a linear thinking to something that is not linear. And for instance, we have tons of examples, stabilization in the DRC, mediation process in Cameroon. They didn't solve the conflict. The conflict is still there, the issues are still there. Does this mean that everything we did was not successful? No, it means it was successful, but not in the way we conceive it. And I think right now, this lack of definition or shared understanding of what success means is hampering, for instance, adaptive learning, adaptive programming, because the moment we don't see what we have in our logical framework achieved, we all get scared. Then, this is where we have the mistrust, this is where we say, we cannot demonstrate the results. So I think in terms of innovation is also stimulating the thinking about how do we define success and how do we communicate this to those who are not in the technical space.
I mean, we have,
also,
for instance,
if we could, we're about to come to the final points. I want to just connect with some of the questions that were raised also, because, for example, when we're looking at the issue of timing, and when we need evaluation, but it takes a long time. I think one of the things to take away from the conversation is also there are many different evaluative practices. We so often think of evaluation as what you do at the end of a project, and then the report comes an extended period after. And that can be an important component, but the field has grown richly. So we have rich evaluative practice that you can do right when you're designing a process to make sure you're really testing and challenging the logic of what's being done, or bringing in evidence from the past to look at what do we know from this experience in the field already, have we taken that on board? There's evaluative practice which needs to look long into the future, because you don't have the impact at the end of 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, but it's a process that needs to be supported. On partnership, a lot of the work in the field has been criticized as very top-down, colonial, external consultants brought in where they don't speak the language or the context. So on the one hand, it's also engaging much more with the knowledge and expertise within communities, within the context. And instead of evaluation reports of 40, 60, 200 pages just being sent to a northern donor, making sure that that information is transparently and democratically shared so that you can have broader engagement with the knowledge. And in short, the humanitarian and development fields are amongst the most evaluated of any field of human activity. Military, business, and many others are not. And it would be interesting to see if those means actually achieve the goals that they say they will. We're coming to the last moments. Imagine you were in a context where you were speaking to an audience of citizens, practitioners, researchers, policymakers, like this one here. And you had the chance to say, okay, yes, we're in this crisis. What would be the advice, practically, tangible, in terms of what can we do to bring in evaluation, to bring in innovation, to help us chart our way forward in this uncertain time?
I would say that we should build the expectation of learning and adapting into our everyday incentives. In other words, if you and I are being assessed in our job, part of the question should be, show me how you have adapted over the past year. What things have you done differently as a result of what you've learned? So that we can make that learning as part of our everyday, ongoing, continuous process of managing a situation.
I fully agree, and we often provide best practices for how we want people to behave at work or do sports or whatever. So we should also use best buys or similar frameworks for development aid, provide funders, private funders, but also agencies, bilateral donors, help from evaluation and knowledge expert environments. What are the best things we should invest in and what not?
When you give money to any cause outside a country, it's a huge responsibility. So one needs to understand that one cannot be selfish, just looking at one's own interests. So my advice would be to make sure and put pressure on policy and on evaluators that the right questions are asked for the right reasons, that evaluation responds to issues that really matter and that can make a real difference in people's lives. And not do harm, and beyond not do harm, really do good. And it's not just about development, it's global development. And we really, I want to come back, please, let's work together rather than divide the world into blocks. Let's come together and just make sure that we understand how to collaborate with those who may not share the same ideologies, but who can help save the world together with us. And there are many of those.
Yeah, I think really the key is to come together. We're going towards tough time. We all have different type of expertise. We have different type of background. Citizens are key to the process. We need to know what citizen wants to be answered on both sides, both from those who are paying taxes that are funding development cooperation and those who are receiving the services. And we need to come together to see who can answer those questions, because sometimes it's not evaluation, sometimes it's academia, sometimes it's the government. And held each other accountable. I think we need to bring back this concept of mutual accountability, where each actor is accountable to each other to do their part, and making sure not, and moreover, the other thing is moving away from this strong focus on efficiency. It's key. The funding are shrinking, but making sure we keep the effectiveness and the relevance of what we are doing at the center of our work.
Evaluation has a fundamentally democratic function. It's about enabling us as a society to really know, is what we're supporting as a country, or when I'm donating or contributing to an organization, is it working? How is it working? And how can we together learn how to do it better? And that's why it was also very important for us as an evaluation department to have this session here at Arendalsuka, to bring these conversations up into our public dialogue on this. We're also doing a global consultation that is open to citizens in Norway and citizens and people around the world to be asking, in this moment, what do you feel are the critical issues we need to look at when doing evaluation and rigorously challenging development cooperation, humanitarian aid, peace building, and our work in the field. So if you go to the eval website of the department, you'll see that there is a public survey that is open, that we're also asking for your insights and recommendations of the critical questions that you feel we need to ask. On behalf of myself, I want to say thank you so much to our panelists, not only for sharing with us today, but for the work that you do every day, and to the people that are involved in this field around the world. Thank you so much for joining us for the conversation. And Henrik, we have a few moments left. I will hand it back to you to bring us together.
I just want to say thank you to everyone here today, and also for the panel, of course, and to the audience that helped shape the debate as well. That's what was important for us, to help engage in that way. And I think it also gave direction to the conversation, which is important for us. So thank you, and have a nice evening still.
Thank you.